Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, January 16th, 2025. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Steve Wilkes and I enjoy some beers and a really good conversation with Brian Brennfoerder, brewer at West Mountain Brewing in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Brian is a one-man band there at West Mountain, and he comes to the position having only started home brewing less than a year ago. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing, and many thanks to everybody who's helping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. And many thanks to the new Patreon subscribers who are signing up every week. Your help is very much appreciated. Susan and I bottled the little beer that Chris Colby and I formulated in last week's show. It came out lower in alcohol than we anticipated. We flavored it with a cacao nib tincture, some vanilla extract, some black cherry flavoring, and tarted it up with an ounce of lactic acid since my plans to use a sour starter fell through. I blame the probiotic stuff that I used. I don't think it actually had any active stuff in it. I looked for Good Belly Pro Shots because I had good luck with those in the past, but I couldn't find any locally. Listener Steve from Roswell, Georgia, wrote to me and said, I've had some good success with kettle souring with Good Belly probiotic juice. Unfortunately, Steve says I don't see a cherry flavor, though the actual flavor contribution is pretty minimal in a 5-gallon batch. Well, thanks, Steve. Unfortunately, the store that allegedly stocked Good Belly products didn't have any of them when I looked. It's good to know, though, that both the shots and the juice can get the job done. I think the lactic acid addition did the trick. Fortunately, it brightened up the little beer, and I think it really brought out the cherry flavor. I'm looking forward to tasting that one after it carbs in the bottle. I've got an empty keg now because my batch of Belgian Golden that I brewed is gone. Luckily, I have a couple of keg-filled bottles set aside for Steve and me to taste on the video show. I brewed that beer with B45 Gnome from our friends and sponsors Imperial Yeast. I was really happy with the way that beer turned out. Obviously, it's gone. I gave a second pouch to Steve, and he's planning on brewing a Belgian single with it. His recipe sounds really fun. Gnome's time being the featured strain from Imperial's running out, but you might still be able to find it at your local homebrew store. If you see it, grab it. It's a goodie. But all of Imperial strains are delicious and dependable, so you can't go wrong with a pouch of Imperial yeast, no matter what you pick out. With 200 billion cells in each easy-to-open package, my stir plate is dusty because I don't use it anymore to make starters for moderate gravity 5-gallon batches. My airlocks are usually bubbling before bedtime. Ask your local homebrew store about Imperial yeast and check out all the dependable deliciousness at imperialyeast.com. That's imperialyeast.com. Okay, last week I talked about going to West Mountain with Steve and having a great time, sipping tasty beers and eating delicious food. And as I said last week, we were by ourselves in the dining room, thanks to dry January. Luckily, it looks like the month's dry grip is loosening a little bit because a handful of customers came in after we were done talking to Brian. I really enjoyed this chat. Brian is living the dream of being a professional brewer with not much experience under his belt. However, his attention to detail, his drive to continually improve, and his desire to make his customers happy will get him a long way down the road. Steve Wilkes, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Hey, James, it's good to see you.
It's 10 o'clock in the morning. We got beers in front of us here at West Mountain Brewing here on the square, and we are with the current brewer who we haven't talked to yet on the show, Brian Brennfoerder.
That's right. Good morning.
Good morning. I have to get some credit for saying the last name correctly.
Yes, you do. You're one of the very few who gets it.
Well, you told us last time, and that was a week ago, and I can't believe that I remembered. So, welcome to the show. You are the latest in a fairly long line of brewers here at West Mountain, and a lot of them have gone on to their own places, and we'll talk about that aspect in a bit. But you, as we walked in, you were going over kind of the history of the place and some past recipes. and you've got both I think a firm foundation here at West Mountain to build on, and a little bit of an intimidation factor, I would think.
Yes, that's well said. I have enjoyed going back through the history of the place and seeing who has cut their teeth here and done their experimenting here and set their pathways for future breweries that they open and go on to be very successful. So the phrase "standing on the shoulders of giants" comes to mind. They are some very big brewing boots I have to fill here. But there's also a giant file cabinet of everything those guys have done here. So I am well set up for success, you might say.
So there's details of every beer that's been brewed here?
I believe so. Every single beer has its brew log, and they're all in the file cabinet right there in that room. So they're all available.
Excellent. And Steve, we've been coming to West Mountain for a long time. Talk about the reputation of the place from your perspective.
Well, I can't vouch for anybody else, but I can say that this is kind of my favorite tap room in town. Although there are others I like very much. Don't get me wrong, but there's just something kind of cozy and kind of 70s feeling about this place. It's kind of nice, you know. It's just like the little neighborhood pub. It's the closest thing actually to a pub that we've got, a real pub, as opposed to in Fayetteville. It's just a college town. If you go out anywhere, you're going to be mauled by college students. And maybe that gets that way late at night here. I don't know. But during the day, this is a great place to come and have good beer and good pizza.
Mm-hmm. And sandwiches as well.
Oh, yeah.
And salads. The shrimp salad I love quite a bit. But this is kind of like we were talking last week. We were here a week ago today, and I was talking about that this, in my mind, is kind of like the last vestige of old Fayetteville. You know, I went to school here like 40 years ago. Yeah. And this still feels like Fayetteville the way it kind of used to be, like in the 80s, which is a good thing. And you see a lot of older, like, professors here, and you see, students here, and you see this kind of a good mix of Fayetteville to come in and kind of, get a cross-section of who's here in town.
Yeah, I agree. Fayetteville is a place that I didn't experience much growing up. I grew up in Joplin in the 70s. So Fayetteville was a place that you drove through on the way to Devil's Den. And it hadn't really exploded like it has. The school was here, but it wasn't a destination for me as a kid. And when the opportunity came for me to brew here, I was kind of excited about that, actually, because I live in Rogers now, but Fayetteville had kind of been off my radar. So I agree. The cross-section of people here is definitely, like you say. And that's one of the first things they told me was that the regulars that come here are such a big part of the flavor and the color of this place, that they just have been coming here for as long as it's been a place, and they're not going anywhere. And I love seeing them. They roll in around 2:30, 3 o'clock every day, which is about the time I'm wrapping up, so I get to come out and chat with them for a while, and that's super cool.
Immediate feedback.
Yes, exactly. Oh, it's so crucial. Yeah, I'm like, hey, how's the IPA tasting? How's the blonde? I got a new Schwartz beer coming out, and they eat it up, and they give me good feedback.
It's like you got a sensory panel just kind of hanging out all the time.
Exactly.
I was going to say, I can remember when the sign painters painted West Mountain Brewery on the window out there. I mean, that's been a minute or two.
And the equipment sat idle for years because of something to do with the manufacturer, and it was like they had troubles at the time or something. But the brewery is in the front window of the place. So, it was teasing us. It was tantalizing that there was this craft brewery coming, I guess we had the Ozark brewing down on Dixon Street at that time, but it sat there idle for a long time until Andy Coates, future owner of Ozark Beer Company, came in and actually made it work, and I guess he was the first real brewer here. Talking again about big shoulders to stand on. I want to get into your background more, but we've got a selection of 5 beautiful beers sitting in front of us. So let's start off. Is this the blonde?
It is the blonde. When I took the job, I needed to know that the beers were going to come out good. straight from the beginning. So I dug through that file cabinet of brew logs and picked the recipe for each of the five staples that needed to be brewed first. And I love this blonde that Jesse and Kennan did together with a Belgian K97 yeast. It just adds like a delicate floral flavor to it that makes it more interesting than just a static blonde. But that's what we have going on here, and I'm really happy with where it is right now.
It's delicious. It's a great beer to start the day off with. It does have I'm glad you said the Belgian yeast, because it does have a fruity character that's very nice. It's not overly expressive, but it's nice. The malt bill is quite delicate, but it's under there, and this fruitiness on top of it, I think, just invites you to take another sip.
Yeah, it's delicious. It's just light and refreshing. I use the term not in the pejorative way. This is a great lawnmower beer. Mm-hmm. It's a great beer for hot weather, but this is kind of my style of beer anymore. I'm kind of a blonde Kolsch kind of guy, so this beer sings my song.
And talk a little bit about the malt bill, and what you've got. You're on top of things. You got the recipe on your laptop right there in front of us.
I do, and that's been crucial for me. I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit later, but I don't have the experience that a lot of people who find themselves in a professional brewing job have. So I've been leaning hard on software to help me fine-tune the recipes. So I'll start with the old brew log, and then I'll translate it to the producer, the malt provider that I have available at the time. So this is some Pilsen and base malt, white wheat, and some Cara Munich that I put in there, for the body. But it's a relatively simple. I try to keep it, at least for the first batches, pretty close to what the guys before me brewed, so that I know the result is going to be drinkable, right? And then I can tweak it in case something changed in the, malt is a crop, so it's going to be different from year to year. So that's kind of what I've done, and I am just now getting to the point where the things that need to change about the beer are apparent to me, and I can make those little tweaks, and maybe 5 more pounds of this, maybe 5 pounds less of that, maybe change my hop addition times and amounts and things. So yeah, that's where we are. And this I'm currently using a Brewfather, which is designed for home brewing, really, but it lets me scale up to a large scale and gives me my projected ABV, my projected IBUs, and all of that. I can kind of have an idea of where it's going to land without it just being a shot in the dark.
Yeah, I use that as well, and I like the usability of it, and I've got it dialed in to where it's kind of, it works for my system. So, cheers to them.
Yeah, I use that as well, and I've still got an old app called Brew Pal, PAL.
I remember that one.
Well, I've still got it, and it still works. And I've got about 250 recipes that I really need to transfer.
You're a prisoner of the cloud.
I am. Well, that was lovely, but I'm already out.
Do we want to move to the next one already?
No, I'm just
okay.
complaining.
All right. Well, just hold your horses. We're pacing ourselves here, Steve, and we're going to eat here afterwards.
No, I'm setting the pace.
Oh,
you're pacing yourself. I'm setting the pace.
Okay,
let's get it straight.
You're in the car out front.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Brian, tell us about your experience. You said that this is your first professional gig.
Yes, I didn't do it the way most people do it. Just for some easy backstory on me, I am the kind of person who is drawn to jobs that create experiences for people. I'm a big fan of the concept of the third place in your life. You have your work, you have your family, your home life, and then everyone kind of craves this third place that they go to. And it's not a new concept. I didn't make it up, but it refers to places like taverns, pubs, tap rooms, coffee shops, things like that, where you can go and socialize, and there's a reason to be there. There's different levels and layers to that. But that's always been important to me. So my job history includes things like working at bike shops. and also roasting coffee. I roasted coffee for Onyx Coffee Lab in downtown Rogers for a while. That is a big part of that third place in people's lives. I built mountain bike trails for 5 years. Got to be part of the wave of the build out of trails here in Northwest Arkansas. So that's really satisfying to build something that I know my kids are going to enjoy 20 years from now, right? So those kinds of experiences are important to me. So when I was roasting coffee at Onyx, I decided, I think the next thing I'd like to do is brew beer. I hadn't ever brewed beer before. So my buddy Dakota there decided, or he was a home brewer, so I went to his garage and watched him brew Czech Pils and watched that whole process. This was January of last year that I watched my first home brew happen. And I brewed my first batch of beer in March of 2024. Wow. So I'm showing my cards here, but my experience level is extremely low. I planned out a really aggressive homebrew schedule. I drove to Memphis with my son and bought a whole homebrew setup that was really an amazing deal for what I got. A gravity-fed system, but it allowed me to do 5 or 10 gallon batches. And then I bought a bunch of kits from Northern Brewer and cranked out about 8 home brews just as fast as I could to experiment with different styles. And in the meantime, I got a job on the canning line at New Province. So I got my foot in the door at a brewery. I shadowed a few brews there with Hugh Brewer and Court Castleberry. Watched those guys, asked them tons of questions all day long, ran their canning line, eventually ran the Wild Goose, which is, if you've never worked a canning line, it can be some of the most stressful days you've ever had. Just things have to be constantly monitored. But anyway, being in there and just being in the brewery and soaking it all in from guys who had been doing it well for a really long time was super neat. I started knocking on doors everywhere to find a place to be an assistant brewer, to help someone else brew. I couldn't find anyone that was looking at the time. So that was my background. I cranked out as many home brews as I could, but I had everything to learn. I had no knowledge about it at all. I just knew that's where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do.
So you couldn't find an assistant brewership, so you got the head post, the head and only post here.
Yeah, I made myself a regular. Dropping resumes off at every local brewery that just say, "Hey, have you heard anything? You know anyone who's looking?" And who was it? It was Ken over at Rendezvous Junction. He said, "You know what? I think I heard through the grapevine that John at West Mountain has been looking for a while." And I hadn't really looked down here in Fayetteville because I lived in Dallas for a while and I had done my share of commuting for jobs, and I wasn't eager to do that. But I thought, I'm not finding anywhere else. Let's go talk to him. So I came in, and he had somehow been without a brewer for a little bit, and he needed someone in a bad way, and I kind of wanted to take the next step and start doing it. And I thought, who am I going to learn from? Who's going to train me? And he said, well, anyone around here, they're super helpful. You can call this guy, you can call this guy, you can call this guy, and ask all your questions. And I said, I don't know if I'm right for you, and I don't know if you're right for me, but if you'll take a chance on me, I'll give it a shot. I'm a hard worker. I'm a fast learner. I had the passion to do it, and there was a support system around me of all of the other brewers. Andy at Ozark, he gave me some help. Kenan, of course, he came in and spent some time showing me how to hook the pieces together. This is how it works. This is how you do it. And in about 2 weeks, I learned how to brew in a brewery. Obviously, there's so much more, and I still have tons of questions that I ask them all the time. I text them the stupidest questions, I'm sure. How do you do this? How do you do that? But they were super crucial and helpful, and in every way, everything I needed to learn just happened so fast. And I could not have done it without that file cabinet in there with their brew logs. That's what got me up and running. If I can do it clean, and I can do it the procedures correctly, and follow their recipes, it worked out. It worked well.
That's exciting. I told Steve last week, I said, man, if I was 30 years younger, this would be the place.
Yeah,
I would love to work here because, it's a one-man band, and I started out in radio and TV, and my first TV job, I was a one-man band, shooting my own stuff, finding my own stories, writing my own things, and, doing my own interviews, all this kind of stuff, which kind of is translated to my job track. But I brought it around to me, Steve. Imagine that. but to me, it sounds like a dream job. To other people, it might sound like a nightmare because you are the guy. And I know that there most of our audience out there is just salivating, thinking about running a small system in a small, beloved pub, with an existing stable of recipes that they can draw upon. To me, it sounds like a dream. To other people, it might sound like a nightmare.
I told my wife it was about the most stressful 4 weeks of my entire life because there's so much at stake. I'm not just brewing in my garage where I can dump it down the drain and it's nobody's hurt but me. This is someone else has invested in me. So it was super important that I get it right and take my time and make my notes and leave room for the correct adjustments and the correct procedures and all of that.
Your boss just walked in. Let's take this opportunity. Yeah. Steve is thirsty over there. What do we got next?
This is the IPA. This is the staple, the best seller by far here. It is about 64 IBUs, so it hasn't drifted downward in bitterness like a lot of IPAs have. But it's also not a blow your face off bitter beer. So this is one of the ones I lean on the locals and the regulars a lot for feedback on, because if the IPA isn't good, they're not going to drink it anymore. So I need their feedback, and I try to keep it exactly where they want it.
It's kind of an old school IPA in that it is nice and bright and clear, and the hops come through wonderfully. It's not, and don't get me wrong, I love the cloudy, hazy, over the top fruity, East Coast IPAs as well. But this is just kind of a solid old school. I could drink this all day.
Yeah, it's just a good example of this style of beer, and I'm with you. This is the kind of beer that you yeah, there's a reason why IPAs are so darn popular, because they drink so well. And again, if you don't, I remember the days of like you went to cram. I want to get 180 IBUs in that. I said, no, don't. This is still restrained enough that it's drinkable and quaffable. And actually, for an IPA, it's rather refreshing. Sometimes I don't find IPAs refreshing, but this one is. It's good. It's a good beer. And I've noticed in all the beers that you brewed, that how clean they are. Mm-hmm. Of course, this next one will probably be. That's supposed to be a Kolsch. Can't see through it. But they're very clean. That was the thing that struck me the most, more than being fruity or light or malty. It's clean.
Yeah, you got your process down.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to just say one more thing. That's very impressive to me. When you said you'd only been brewing for a year, at a year's time of me being a home brewer, I thought hops were brown. Yeah. So,
Yeah, and every now and then, after a few weeks on the bottle, your beers would kind of, or our beers would kind of change. One's beers would kind of change back in the day. It was like, this is an interesting flavor coming up. I've never tasted this before, and we didn't realize that we weren't as careful as we should have been in the cleaning and sanitization process. So kudos on that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, there's a lot of tools and chemicals, process aids here available to me that I didn't have at home. At home, you just give it time. You have a 2-week primary, 2-week secondary, and then a 2-week bottle carb time. So here, you got to get the beer out. So all these process aids, the force carbing, the biofine, clarifying agent, those kinds of things that you add. Again, those processes were already set in place. Like they had already perfected them, all those brewers before me. So all I had to do was spend a couple of weeks reading am taking my notes. I have a standard operating procedure that's scribbled out on legal pad that's like 5 pages long, and only I can read it. But I created that from all of those notes, and that's where the clarity comes from. I wasn't doing it at this level at home. So it's learning from those guys what they did and what makes it come out right that makes it work.
Yeah, I tend to brew beers that are, quote, homebrew clear. I always say if you don't like the way my beer looks, close your eyes.
Close your eyes and think of England.
No, talk about this recipe before we get too far away from the IPA.
The one thing that jumps out in this recipe that an interesting story about this is that this was the first beer that I made here, was the IPA. And I put it in a growler, and I drove straight over to Bentonville Brewing because the last long-term brewer that was here was Ken Haney, who was one of the first graduates of the Certificate of Competency in Brewing program at U of A. He did his internship under Jesse here at West Mountain, and then he was the head brewer here for a while, and then he took the position as head brewer at Bentonville Brewing. So I filled a growler of IPA, and my very first beer here, and I drove it straight to Bentonville Brewing. I said, "Hey, I'm on my way." And he took the time, and he poured a glass, and he drank it, and he said, "There's Cara Munich in here, isn't there?"
Wow.
The guy knows his stuff. Like, wow. He picked it out, and that's I don't know how unusual that is for an IPA, but it was something that was in the recipe that I chose, because recipes drift over time, so I had to just pick one and go with it. And I really enjoyed the caramely body that it gave to the IPA, and he immediately picked up on that, which let me know where I was on the level of experience. Like, I would never have been able to pick that out, but he did, and so that's to me the interesting thing about this recipe, and I think I'm going to keep that because I like what it gives to the beer.
Yeah, it's not over crystally. No, it's not overly sweet, but there is a nice kind of caramely note in the background. What's the percentage on that?
The Cara Munich is only 5%.
Oh, okay. So that couldn't have been very much because it didn't change the beer. I mean,
No, it's not like mine where I would put like 10% Crystal 60 in my pale ales.
No, you don't do that.
Well, I used to.
Well, I know you used to. Recipes used to be 8 pounds of this and 1 pound of that and 1 pound of this, no matter what.
Yeah, it's just either that or people would come into your homebrew shop, and you could tell when they were using a brewing program because it would be like, I want 3.5 ounces of this, and I want
2.3 kilograms of that, and I just need a half of a gram.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Why are you doing that? Why are you putting like half an ounce of black patent in this one recipe? Well, the color was just off on the little scales on the software.
So I'm curious. So you're still a pretty new brewer and a pretty new home brewer. What do you think is, in your experience, what's the difference between those two worlds? Closely related as they are, they're still very different. What do you find to be similar, and what do you find to be different? Compare and contrast.
in essay form.
Yeah, so I never got into recipe creation at home, and I feel like that's a big thing I would have enjoyed doing, but I wasn't ready for that yet. I was just doing Northern Brewer recipes. Here's your everything. Weighed out to 2.7 grams of this, yeah. Mm-hmm. And it just shows up on your door, and if you do it right, it comes out drinkable beer. I don't know if this is the answer to your question, but the thing that kind of made me fade out of home brewing when I took this job was the cleaning. There's like doing it in my garage. I installed a sink, but I have to run my drain hose out the back door, and it's just so much easier to clean everything properly in a brewery. It doesn't, like when you're done brewing here, you got like an hour of cleanup. Wow. But at home, you got it takes a while to get everything really, really, really clean at home.
If you do it right.
Correct, yeah.
My catchphrase: if you like doing dishes, you'll love home brewing.
Yes, yeah. Someone told me it's like brewing is like 80% cleaning, and I'm not sure that number's high enough. It's up there.
Yeah, that's the basis. And usually in the wintertime, you can see the dishpan hands starting to come through. Mashed on hands. I've moved on to the third beer. What do we got here?
This is a brown ale. Some of the beers I've been able to kind of tweak and get really close to what I feel is a final product that I'm going to roll forward indefinitely on. This is one of them. I'm really happy. It's a pretty complicated grain bill. It has a lot of different things in it, but
give us the highlights.
So it's got some Vienna, some melanoidin from proximity, some biscuit, some dark chocolate, some dextrin, Crystal 60, Crystal 120, flaked oats to give it some more body. I made a couple of versions of this before this one, and it had a copperiness and it had a thin body that I didn't love. And to be fair, in the notes of those brew logs, the brewers who had done that recipe before said the same things about it. And so this is where Brewfather really helped me out, and I jumped in and I started doing some tweaking, and I looked, hit Google, how do I add body to beer? How do I, and things like these tweaks that I've done got me more to where I wanted to be. It pulled the coppery high notes out of that flavor profile and gave it some more body and some more balanced sweetness. And I'm pretty proud of this brown. I really like where it's at, and it's one that I feel like I've done some work to earn where it is, rather than just taking someone else's work and rolling with it. I worked on this one, and I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah, I think it's delicious. It's not, like Chris Colby's a big. He's a big, not a big fan of the brown ales, but I think a brown ale done well is extremely enjoyable. Done not well, it's kind of like a watered down porter, but this is not that. It stands on its own. It's got a nice drink. The body is nice. I think you did a good job on that. It's got a nice mouthfeel. What I get most is on the back end, just right after the swallow. There's some little chocolatey note that's very satisfying but not overpowering.
Yeah, I get some chocolate. I'd agree with you on that. And again, I keep going back to how clean the beers are. Just remarkably so, in my opinion, and actually clear. So you talked about using biofine as your fining agent. Just beautiful beers. Real tasty, a little chocolatey. There's a little bit of that hop astringency, or I don't even know where the astringency is coming from. I'm not that smart a palate. But there's a little astringency at the end, and I like that because it kind of cleans it up. It kind of closes the mouthfeel off. It's a good beer. What's your yeast on this one? Do you use the same yeast for all the beers? Do you have a house yeast, or do you move it around?
No house yeast. USO5 is in almost every beer here. I'm using 3470 for the lagers and the K97 for Belgian. And I haven't branched out much past that. Before you guys got here, I was planning my year and deciding which beers I'm ready to experiment with next. And so those will require different yeasts. But for now, this one and most of them here are USO5.
This is very nice.
That's the yeast.
You go with what works, for sure. Right now, you're sort of relying, and understandably so, you're still getting your feet under you, but relying on recipes from the past. What are beers that you've done that you have liked that are on your wish list? And how much flexibility does John give you?
He's really flexible in that regard. There are 5 that he wants to keep on tap at all time: the IPA, the blonde, the stout, the light, and the brown ale. He said if you have those 5 on at all times, then what you do beyond that is up to you. You can play, and you can tell that from the file cabinet in there is that the guys, for the most part, who brewed here used it as an experimental place for them to try out recipes. Like I made a list of all the one-off brews that never got brewed again, and it's a long, long list of all the different styles. You can tell it's a place where the brewer has the freedom to, let's try a saison, let's try a rye pale ale, let's try this and that and that, and there's you can't think of a recipe, a style of beer that hasn't been brewed here at one time or another, and maybe twice, maybe by two different guys, but there's so many of those. So in planning out my year, now that I kind of have the basics, I'm looking forward to doing maybe some higher ABV beers. I'd love to do a Belgian, a Tripel or a Quad, or Belgian Strong Dark. Some of those they speak to me like this. There's craft beer. There was when I discovered craft beer, and then there's when I discovered those beers. Like that's something special, right? You're like, okay, this one's got a little bit more going on. I'm gonna drink this a little slower. I'm gonna enjoy it, and those hold a special place for me. So those are in there. I know the lagers are tricky to do here time-wise. I only have 2 fermenters, so I can't necessarily afford to give a lager the amount of time that it would like to have. But I spent a lot of time talking to Cord at New Province and to Zach over at Natural State. They do almost entirely lagers, so he's the man when it comes to that. And so I've been picking their brains about how quickly can I do it? Like, I want to do it right, but I also need to keep up with everything else. So lagers are on my menu. Like, I want to figure out how to do those well within the time that I have available here. Then there's things like sours. Do I want to do a kettle sour and take the chance? Do I want to do, try with one of the new yeasts that gives the effect of a sour without being lactobacillus? How do I want to approach that? So I've got a lot of ideas I want to try out this summer.
How open are you to playing with, say, Kvike and doing like a pseudo lager? Does that appeal to you, or does that insult your brewer purity of?
I know that he just asked a question, but I want to have a follow on already. What kind of beer do you drink when you just drink at home? Before you were a professional brewer, when you were a home brewer, what were you brewing? What were you drinking? Which would inform how you brew and what you brew today.
And then I have a third question.
I don't think I ever really settled on a style or a type of beer that was my go-to all the time. There's so much out there to try that, like, if I go to a liquor store and I'm looking in the beer cabinet, I'm probably gonna choose something that I haven't had before. Like, if it's a special occasion, I'll get like a Three Philosophers, right, or something like that. I'll always go for those stronger ones, because I don't necessarily want to drink 5 or 6 beers in a row, but if I can drink one that does the job and I can enjoy the flavor, and there's so many complex layers to it. So those became kind of my go-to. But if I'm just having a beer with dinner, like an Ozark Pale Ale, like something like that is just a good drinkable. Like, if I'm out at a restaurant, their APA was my jam for so long. I like that quite a bit. But I forgot the question you asked.
Kvike, see, you didn't like my question, so you wanted to knock it out of the queue.
I just didn't want to forget my question.
Give you my notepad. You have to supply your own pen, apparently.
And I haven't answered.
Kvike Pilsner or Kvike Lager.
I have an answer to that. One of the questions I asked Kenan specifically is, I said, did you like the lagers that you made here? And he tried them a few different ways. There's a serving vessel in there that you can leave something in for a while. He said he tried keg lagering a couple of times, and I said, well, how'd it come out? And he said, well, about like you'd expect, which I interpreted to mean he wished it was a little better, but it was a drinkable lager. So to me, that presents a challenge. Like, I want to get this, and I want to get it right. And we're about to try the next one, which is my very first lager I've done here, which uses 3470 yeast. And I brewed it 2 weeks before Christmas. And so I had some selfish reasonings here. I thought, if I have a lager in and I give it 4 weeks, I won't have to brew the week of Christmas, and I can just have some family time. So it served 2 purposes. I gave the lager 4 weeks total, and I got some time with family. And so this is my first one, but to answer your question, I'm not opposed to something like Kvike, but I also am really I'm really driven to do lagers. I'd like to change my light beer to a lager and have it ongoing as a lager if I can nail it.
You want to solve the puzzle.
Exactly. Oh, I'm driven by that for sure.
This is national. What is it? National Treasure? National. What's the? What are the movies where they're trying to solve the puzzle?
Nick Cage. Yep.
Okay. Now let's Steve and I have had 3 samples. Let's. You've already.
Junior samples. They
Jun-
weren't
they're
very big.
yeah, BR 549 samples.
Yeah.
Now. We know that this is a dark beer. We know that it's a lager. We know that it's inspired by Christmas. We're working on a puzzle here ourselves. I get cinnamon. There's some. This is not just like a Schwartz beer, which I know you have and we had last week. This is Christmassy. This is wintry. This is fun.
It's good. There's some spice going on. I get like black pepper and cinnamon. And almost like even a little chili. Not that it's hot. I don't mean that. I just mean there's just that little character that's not grain and it's not yeast.
It's sort of chocolatey. It's now I'm remembering an Instagram post from here. So I have a slight advantage. I think this is. This is the mole beer, right?
Oh no, this is. Unless we got them out of order.
I think we got them out of order.
Yeah, okay, that explains it. I was like, I don't know why you're
that's
getting
out of
those
order.
things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no wonder that was a little spicy.
Sorry, I switched mine and I did not switch your samples. So
Okay,
yes.
so refer that earlier story later when we talk about.
But I'm glad we didn't brag on what a great Schwartz beer that was.
I was a little confused by your comments.
No, I was like, this is Christmassy. This is this is the mole beer, right?
It is, yes.
So it's not the lager.
Which is my standard stout. It's a 6.5% cream stout. It's lower on the cream scale. It doesn't have a ton of lactose sugar, but I did want to lean that direction. But then it's also been aged with toasted cacao nibs, cinnamon, vanilla beans, and ancho peppers, which was...
Oh, yeah. Now I'm getting the heat.
So I went all the way back to Andy's first recipe of mole. Which
I remember that beer.
Yeah, which he used ancho peppers. I looked specifically. So I went to Whole Foods and I bought a ton of ancho peppers. And I put 2 in each keg, and there was no heat. And I put 6 more in each keg, and there's still no heat. So what you're tasting is I actually used chipotle. I transferred that beer onto chipotle peppers to get some heat, because the anchos, they're a crop, right? Some have less heat, some have more heat, but I wasn't getting any heat from those. So this has that smoky chipotle flavor in addition to the ancho peppers there.
Yeah, the heat is building, which is what you want, because there's a delayed reaction with the capsaicin in chilies, in that the receptors for those, I think, I did an interview many years ago with a flavor guy. The receptors for those are under the skin, so that's why it takes a little bit for the heat to hit you, and then a lot longer for it to go away, because you can't just wash it out of your mouth. I think this is an appropriate level of heat, because I'm 2/3 of my way through the small sample, and now the heat is starting to build up. This is something that I would feel comfortable in drinking a whole pint and not starting to sweat, and starting to not enjoy the. I love hot stuff, as Steve can attest. But I think it's nice when an ingredient sneaks up on you over the course of a pint. It makes it a lot more fun to drink.
I got nothing.
Do you taste in the heat?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I just can only kind of amplify what you just said, but yeah, I mean, it's got all the little flavor components that you want. It's not over the top. I don't really like gimmicky beers, and this isn't gimmicky, but it has a lot of complexity and a lot of layers without, I don't know, being kind of a beer you brew for the homebrew contest,
Yeah. It's not a novelty beer.
It's not a novelty beer.
Yeah. So talk about the recipe.
Well, this is one that when I took the job, they said, "Oh, and by the way, everyone will expect the chocolate mole beer in the wintertime." And I had never brewed one at home or otherwise, and so this was a new thing for me. And so I took my regular stout that I'm happy with, and toasted the cacao nibs, sourced everything, and the ingredients, put them in a nylon bag, and used a trick that I saw online about using marbles, sanitized marbles, put them in the nylon bag to keep it down at the proper level. But you have to tie that bag to the spear so it doesn't get sucked in at the bottom. And then the last missing piece to the puzzle was the time. How long is it going to take? And since peppers are a crop, you don't know if you have spicy ones or not spicy ones. So I kegged it and set it in there. And our manager, Jessica, she comes in on Monday mornings. And so I decided that we're going to have Mole Monday. Mole Monday is when you put the mole keg on tap and you test it and see if it's there yet or not. So we did that for 3 or 4 weeks until it was to the point where it's that nice balance of building gradual heat, but not like a blow your face off chili beer.
And the cacao nibs are really coming through now.
Yeah.
We have the luxury of talking for a long time and having these beers warm up. And that's a mistake I make way too often, is I drink a beer way too quick right out of the refrigerator. And so I don't get – the last sip is like, dang, that was good. I wish that I had a whole pint of that now. But my taste buds are, were dead at the beginning. But this is a really nicely balanced, flavorful beer, again, without being a novelty thing. I would certainly have a pint of this.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we got one more beer in front of us. What important question should I ask Steve?
I don't know.
Well, we've explored. I think that the idea of having some nice big Belgian beers. I know what I wanted to talk about. Your gear. This is a very small setup. From what I understand in talking to past brewers, I don't want to get into the details, but it has its quirks, as does every small system. Is it kind of what do you feel about working with a system like this where, it's kind of old and crotchety maybe, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's got its ways it wants to work. And you've got to kind of work with that and work around it sometimes maybe. And do you find that challenging? Do you find that inspiring? How do you approach that?
It is a relatively small system. It's a 3.5 barrel boil brew kettle with 7 barrel fermenters. So I brew twice to fill one fermenter. And there are a lot of little tricks that, as I mentioned before, Kenan came in and spent couple hours with me showing this is how you do knockout, this is how you do runoff, this is how you do the things that need to happen here. By the way, the HLT heating element has been burned out since before I was ever here, so it doesn't work. So you need to fill your HLT, transfer it to the boil kettle, heat it up, transfer it back down. Like there are steps that I couldn't have figured out on my own. At least not for a while, that he really helped me with. But those kind of things, like they add character. In a way, it's kind of like a bigger version of home brewing. Like you have to solve problems and figure things out when you're home brewing in your garage. So those kinds of things, like they don't bother me. I kind of like it. I like problem solving. I like working something out and deciding how can I get this done better, more efficiently, better for the beer. Like what are the steps here? And some of those I can figure out, and some of those I've had help along the way. But I enjoy it. I really do.
I think that having constraints inspires creativity. And whether it's legal constraints, I mean, there are styles of beer that arose because you couldn't have a mash tun above a certain size, or you get taxed more, or, you name it. There's a whole list of things that, because of legal constraints alone, brewers had to be more creative, and therefore certain styles exist because of that. Or because of, couldn't get that kind of grain this year. So you started brewing with this kind of grain or this other crop, or you had to add sugar or whatever. So I think that if you have the right mindset, that constraints can inspire you to new levels of creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to add one more thing about that, is that having spent a little bit of time in bigger breweries, something is always going to go wrong. It doesn't matter the size of your equipment; it's never going to work perfectly every single day. Like your glycol system is going to go down, your boil kettle is going to stop boiling. Your stuff goes wrong no matter how much you spent on it, and so it's not really that far removed from a bigger system as far as the challenges involved.
If we learn anything from our disaster show every year,
That's right.
it's the resourcefulness of homebrewers. When things go horribly wrong, sometimes you can come out with some wonderful stuff. And speaking of wonderful stuff, the last beer that we have is the Schwartz beer. There's no guessing. We've had a spoiler, and we had this a sample of this. Did you have a full pint?
I had a pint.
You had a pint. And it's a delicious beer.
Actually, it's not a bad beer to finish on because it kind of is a palate cleanser after the mole beer, which is heavier and spicier and it has a lot more going on. This is a nice. It's lighter. It's still fairly rich, because it's fairly rich, but it's not heavy. So it's a nice palate cleanser and a nice beer to end on.
The 1554 from New Belgium is kind of my baseline for this type of beer. And I like that. It's been a long time since I've had it, but I like that beer quite a lot. This is a little more interesting, I think, in that it has got a teeny bit more kind of roasty character, in my opinion. The 1554 is almost like it's been a long time, but almost like a black Pilsner from what I remember.
That's my memory of it. I haven't had one in some years either, but I used to buy it fairly often, every couple of months I'd buy a 6-pack, and I enjoyed the beer. But yes, it didn't really. If you closed your eyes, at least this is my memory of it. If I closed my eyes, I couldn't tell it was a dark beer.
Right.
And I think in some ways that's the point. But I prefer just a little more body and a little more of this malt feel. That's what I get more out of this beer. Can't comment on the hops because I don't remember the 1554 enough. But this is, well balanced and drinkable, and like I say, it's a nice beer to kind of end the day on.
And as a lager, it's fermented clean.
Yeah.
I think you did a good job.
Yeah.
So talk about your recipe.
The recipe, and again, I'm showing my cards here, but Brewfather has a library of homebrew recipes that people have done as clones to this style or clones to this brand or clones to this other beer. And so I've started digging through those, and my inspiration for wanting to do this, I wanted to try a lager, and B, it's wintertime, so I thought let's do a black lager. And a few weeks back I was at Bike Rack Brewing in Bentonville, and they have a beer called Cut Off Schwartz. Yeah. And I tried that, and I really liked it, and I thought I want to try my hand at that. So I dug through the library in Brewfather's. We are not sponsored by Brewfather.
No. Not yet, at least.
But right?
Coming soon.
But I adapted one of their recipes to the grain I had available and made it. And I am actually surprised at the smokiness, the roastiness that's in it. And that was, my wife's not a big beer drinker, but I took a growler home and shared it with her. And that was the first thing she picked up on, which I was not expecting. So I might tweak it, I might not. We'll see. But for my first lager, I gave it the 4 weeks that I was able to, and I think it clarified and fermented out really well.
Yeah, I think it's very nice. I like the roasty character. And again, the reason that I was attracted to 1554 to begin with was this is a dark beer that's not, roasty, because that was, that's the style. This brings a little bit more of the roastiness to the table, and I think I like it.
Thank you.
I'm out of beer and out of thoughts.
Well, and I'm going to have a little pizza. I don't know what you're going to have. Maybe that's off the record. Well, Brian, welcome. I would like to come here. Steve and I talked last time. We had such a great time. That it would be nice to establish a routine of coming back here. Maybe just me and Steve, or me and Detlef. Yeah. Detlef, our friend Detlef, was supposed to join us today. He couldn't. It'd be nice to have Detlef along too, and just have lunch and have a kind of a nice diversion among some good beers. And it's I was a little worried for a while because it took a little while for another brewer to come in, but I'm so glad it's you, and I'm so glad that you're brewing such great beers.
Well, thank you, and I would love to be surrounded by the kinds of people that know what they're talking about and have years of experience.
Well, if we find it, he will let you know.
Or at least can pretend.
Yeah, I'm aware of the concept of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you learn so quickly at the beginning that you feel like you've mastered it, but you're just standing on the chasm of what can be learned. And I am clearly right there. I'm a functional brewer, but there's so many things I have yet to learn. I'm excited by that.
Excellent. Can't wait to see what's next. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Many thanks to Brian and to Steve. That was a really fun day. I wound up having the cheese pizza again, and I stuck with the IPA to pair with it. I'm looking forward to going back to West Mountain to see what Brian's brewing next. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dutz. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voice, and we'll talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well and stay tuned. So long.